So last week we finished Genesis chapter 10, and here we are at the beginning of chapter 11. And to a certain degree, we are getting ready to go to the story of the Tower of Babel. But the other side of that is this is really an interlude in the line of genealogy. If you remember, as we ended things last week, the last couple of verses of Genesis 10 said that this was at the time of the Great Division. And we even looked at those names. What was it? The one was named Peleg because in his time the earth was divided. And then we looked up the name Joktan, and it means they are diminished. And so there's this reality here within the genealogies that things were supposed to get better, and they didn't. And so these next few verses, Genesis 11, 1 through, make sure I get it right, 1 through 9, are really an interjection of a story to explain why they made these statements in the genealogy. See, we tend to think of the stories as the main thing, and the genealogies are the interjections. We like to bypass them. But for a people who were deeply concerned about where you came from, family was of the utmost importance. The genealogy was actually more important to many of the Hebrew peoples than the stories that we tell. So I just want to keep that in mind as we read this story. But are there any lingering questions or comments or concerns before we hop into chapter 11? Anybody remember anything? Or all right. Then Genesis 11, my first paragraph is 1 and 2. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. Anything yet? Anything stand out? One language. One language, yeah. Anything else, or does anybody else say something different?
I said Babylonia.
Yours says Babylonia instead of the Shinar? So they're tying this to a very specific area. Anybody else say Babylonia or Babylon? A handful of you. Why would they tie it to Babylon? Any ideas?
They got tired of traveling, and that's where they stopped.
Well, I mean, yes. One of the things you're going to see.
They were the Hamites.
They were some Hamites that settled what is now what we call Babylon. Yes, but and what do we know about the family of Ham? What did we say last week? There are antagonists. Remember, Japheth is the family line that our heroes are going to come out of. Ham are the antagonists, and Shem is the family that our heroes, the Israelites, are going to come from. Ham is the antagonist, and Japheth, even though he's the oldest, he just kind of, they're everybody else. So if they are pointing to the family of Ham, what do you think this is going to mean?
They're antagonists.
It's an antagonistic story, which means it's going to explain why something has gone bad. Okay? So anytime that you see things like the family of Ham, I told you the Israelite name for Egypt is Mitzraham, house of Ham. So for them, Egypt takes on this antagonistic role almost always. Babylon is settled by the descendants of Ham. Is Babylon ever considered a people that the Israelites liked in the Old Testament? No, this is one of a list of people that they say, this is not going to end well. If the place you're going is the seat of people who have chosen not to follow God, they're setting you up to hear that this story is going to end poorly. Do you get what I'm saying? All throughout the Old Testament, what stories like this tell you, and what I want you to pay attention to is, when you see a place name, think about what we know about that place. And it will tell you something about what is going on. Eventually, we're going to see that the land of Canaan is a place where God wants to send his people. We'll experience places like Bethel, the house of God, as a good place for people to go. We'll experience Mount Zion and Jerusalem as good places for people to go. We'll experience things like Shechem that starts good, but then all of a sudden it becomes a place where things are not as good. And so places play a role in the story. If I was to write a story today, and I would set the story in Las Vegas, what are you going to assume?
Sin City.
Sin City. There's probably going to be a story about something going sideways, right? If I'm going to set the story in New York City, what are you going to assume? It's probably going to be a story about how things are just a little crazy. If I set the story in some small country town, what are you going to think? Settings have meaning, right? We understand that intrinsically, but for us, where we grew up halfway around the world, those places don't mean a whole lot to us. Does that make, you get what I'm saying? So when they point here at the beginning, mine says Shinar, but then it says that is Babylonia in my notes. We're already being hinted at. This story is pointing to things going awry. Make sense? Any other thoughts?
What's the difference between one language and a common speech?
Okay, so
Why would
Melissa,
they use two different things to describe a verbal language?
Melissa just asked this question. What's the difference between one language and a common speech? Why would they make both points? What do you think? Some of my educators in the room, or former educators, why do you think they make that designation?
Yeah, could be different dialects within the same language.
Today, absolutely. We talk about different dialects within the language, sure.
Maybe it doesn't mean to, the way it reads. One language and a common speech, just like we say English and what y'all talk about. I don't know that it's two separate things.
What? So it seems to be, in the Hebrew here, I'm looking at it, it's using two very different words. Language has to do with the written word, and speech has to do with what we say.
So is it kind of like a difference between English, like, I don't know, north of Mason-Dixon and the south of Mason-Dixon? I mean, how they have more of an accent and
It could be.
we do, and
I think probably the thing it's wanting us to really understand is there was no notion of dialects difference or written difference. Everyone could understand everyone else in all aspects. They were completely unified. Do you get what I'm saying? At least when it comes to communication. Prime example of this is if you have to, how many of you send texts? How many of you like to send texts? How many of you try to avoid texts at all costs? How many of you have ever sent a text that was misconstrued and someone took it wrong? It's the same language, English, but it's not necessarily the same when it's printed out, right? Unless you see a person say something, the way they inflect it can change the meaning of it. The order of words can change the meaning of it. How their sentence is structured can change the meaning of it. I think all of that is playing into here. And the person who's written this story down, like I've told you before, I think it was Joshua writing it at Moses' behest. They're telling us that the way that they spoke was united and the way that they wrote everything down. In all ways, how they communicated, everyone could understand. Does that make sense? Because let's face it, in our world today, do we even have that here in Richland County? There's all different kinds of ways for people to write stuff down, and sometimes you understand it, and sometimes you don't. And even the way we speak, sometimes we can understand each other, and sometimes we don't. Yet we technically, we have one language and one speech, right? Technically. Anybody ever feel like you're in a single household and between you and your spouse, you're speaking completely foreign languages?
Because he didn't finish his sentences.
Well, maybe you didn't finish it for him and he's used to that. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Because she does it to me all the time. She says, which way do you want me to finish this one?
Pretty much.
That's not fair. She isn't even here to defend.
Yes, it is. She showed up.
Oh, he's there.
Defense, I appreciate it.
Somebody's got my back.
All right, on that note, 3 and 4. They said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. So what do you notice? What stands out to you? What questions does it make you want to ask?
But you're going to be famous too.
You know, I never thought of that question, but that's really good. Who are they going to be famous to? You may pretty much know everybody that's living, right? We're related to everybody at this point, I would assume. That's a really good question.
Future generations.
Future generations. We're doing this for posterity's sake. What else do you notice? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Wouldn't that be like the first idol? Us the first idol?
Oh, yeah. They're absolutely setting this up to be the first idol, at least post the flood. What else?
Where did the tar come from?
Where did the tar come from? Well, I'm not an expert in tar by any stretch. So I'm probably going to defer to you because I would say you probably know a little bit more about tar than I do.
Well, I don't know if it would come to the surface of the earth in certain locations, especially over there.
So I know that, they talk about things like tar pits and things like that, places where it comes to the surface. So bare minimum, we can say that the earth has settled enough to where the tar could raise to the surface or that they could find it somehow. Because I venture to say that shortly after the flood, you probably weren't going to find a whole lot of tar just laying around. Hadn't thought about that. Another good question.
Could it be like the heavy crude is that we have today? Because it's really thick, it's almost like tar.
Mhm. Very well could be.
And by the way, oil is lighter than water, so it would, I think, float.
Yeah, the oil would have wanted to float on top of the water, so I guess, they didn't have the Exxon Valdez to blame for the oil slick after Noah's flood, so.
King James refers to it as slime.
It just says slime.
Slime.
All right.
Might have a bunch of slugs going through.
Anything else you notice?
Michael Gateway says, but not till Genesis 14, but it says, as it happened, the valley of the Dead Sea was filled with tar pits.
No.
What's in 14? You're jumping ahead on me, but
I don't know. Still want to hold it up.
Melissa's looking it up. She's still in my box of infinite knowledge. Oh, okay. Yep. I know that story. We're not jumping ahead to that one. Because that will be a fun night when we get there. That's my Christian Western story night. We'll get there.
It's interesting that they would not want to be scattered over the face of the earth. That's the way you conquer.
Yeah, so there's this interesting reality taking place that across our human history as we know it, people have wanted to expand and they wanted to take ground and they wanted to conquer and be in control of vast swaths of territory. And yet, for some odd reason, these people are like, no, we don't want to be scattered around. Why would that be important?
Hadn't God instructed them to fill the earth?
God had instructed them to fill the earth.
So they're antagonizing.
So they're in Babylon, the place of antagonizing, and they are not going across the face of the earth. Instead of spreading out, they're cloistering together. And on top of that, they're trying to make a name for themselves, and they're doing it by what?
I didn't get to that.
Building a tower into the heaven. Is there anything about this story that is pointing to people who are actually learning the lesson of the flood? No.
Okay, but maybe the big tower was really cool.
Maybe the big tower was really cool. Very, very well could have been. What?
Early Legos.
Early Legos, my wife is saying.
Mine says in this region, bricks were used instead of stone and tar was used for mortar. If they all spoke the same language and they didn't want to scatter all over the world, why is it making a distinction of this region? That implies that there were more regions of people.
So what, I'm assuming that's in your study notes?
No, it's right in the verse.
So in her verse, it's saying that this is accentuating the fact that this is about a group of people in a region who are doing things that are counter to what God had commanded. But it implies that there could have been people in other regions who might have actually been doing what God had commanded. What else do you notice? You know, if that's true, what her Bible is kind of alluding to, is that not a lesson we need to learn? How often do you hear in our culture today, well, what I do only affects me, and I don't have to worry about what you do. You go do you, I'll do me, and we'll be fine. And yet, oftentimes what another person does absolutely spills over and affects other people, doesn't it? Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
It just seems to me that there's almost an echo there of being like God and building it to the heavens, and which was the very thing the serpent said at the beginning. You would be like God.
Serpent didn't even need to intervene this time, did he? For the people to attempt to be like God, to build a tower to the heavens, to make a name for themselves, for them to to gather people together to remember their greatness. It's almost as if what the serpent did back in chapter 3, he's wound the thing up. It's just gonna keep doing what it does. And then that's sad. We just can't seem to learn our own lessons. Anything else? Well, let's try the next paragraph then. 5, 6, and 7. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other. What do you think?
Lots of stuff. Why not let them build it and fail? I don't think that we could really build a tower to the heavens out of brick. I mean, what's the point of not letting them fail?
I don't know. What do you think? I hadn't considered that question before. Why not? Why not allow them to build it and fail?
To make their own choice.
Go ahead.
There's a firmament, so you could eventually reach it.
Okay, she's poking the bear up here. She says there's a firmament that eventually you could reach it and it stops. But I don't know what I'm gonna do
It
with
says nothing would be impossible.
That's crazy too.
that.
He would say nothing just because they speak the same language. I would think nowadays, the world would be a lot better off if we could all speak the same language.
Well, but look at what we've accomplished in the last 100 years. And we still aren't able to speak the same language. We have enough people who've learned multiple languages that we cross communicate. There's still some miscommunication in that, but we didn't have to build a tower. We sent the tower into space. Didn't we? Or unless you believe that was a hoax and that was all just done on the side and they tricked us, but which even the hoax is pretty impressive to do, but I don't know. Why would God not allow them to fail? There, you got an answer for
They
this?
make their own decisions.
So, yeah, but I think you're making the same point he's making.
Yeah.
God allows us to make our own decisions. That's something I've preached a lot. So why wouldn't he allow them to just do this and then fail? Unless he actually believed that they were going to succeed. Thoughts? I'm being honest. I don't have it. I don't.
So maybe they were already giving themselves credit for something that they really should have been giving God credit.
So maybe it's not so much what they had accomplished as it is what they had set out to accomplish. Just the sheer fact of saying, we can do this.
Actually, we is the word instead of God.
So you're pointing out, it's the fact that they would say, we can do this. And God says, no, you can't do this unless we do it together. They were leaving God out of the equation. I could go there. I feel like that's about as good of an answer as any I could give to your question, but it's an important question to ask. Maybe, I guess in some ways, we don't know how much time has passed since the flood. We don't, do we? We haven't really been given ages of people when they had their children this time around, have we? We might get that here in a little bit, is that what you said? But right now, up to this point, we don't. But the reality is it's almost like God saying, can you guys do a little bit better job this time? And not just jump off the cliff so quick? Anything else stand out?
The us are going down and confusing them,
Oh, another nice little thing here.
and it's not capitalized.
Verse 7, come let us. Now, the second thing you said there, I'm going to make a case that I don't like, but I'm going to tell you what I was told in seminary. If you ever receive an email or a letter or a text or anything from me, I always capitalize all references to God, even if it's you, your, whatever. If I'm speaking about God, I just capitalize. But according to the modern English language, you only capitalize the first instance when using personal pronouns in a sentence. So the second thing you said is,
Okay.
it is appropriate in the sentence, the Lord said, and so us doesn't have to be capitalized. I would prefer that it is, but either way, who is the us?
Trinity.
Easy answer, Trinity, right?
Could also be heaven's armies.
It could be God speaking to the whole heavenly army, and in whatever capacity is there. Any other answers? You guys good with those answers? One of the two? Do they put it to bed or do they ask more questions?
The
What?
us in my Bible's capitalized.
The us in your Bible is capitalized? There you go. Kaylee's not here with her Jesus Bible. I wondered if it would have been in blue and if it would have been capitalized. She warned me she wasn't going to be here tonight, so somebody's going to have to pick up the slack. Kaylee's not here to ask the question, but Kenzie's being quiet. What I think is very clear in this, and this is one thing I love about our God. Our God is a God who wants his creation to know what he's doing. He doesn't hide things. He may not give us all the answers. He may not show us the whole picture, but he doesn't hide things. And so here God is saying very clearly, I'm going down to confuse their language on purpose. Now, it's a very different discussion whether we like that reality. And what does that say about God? That God would confuse languages.
That he wants to be in charge. And he can be.
Ooh, I got to sit with that for a little bit. So you just said that God wants to be in charge and he can be. I guess the thing that I'm hanging up with that statement is the word wants. I think it would be appropriate to say that God is in charge and he will be in charge.
Okay.
But to say that God wants to be implies something that I'm struggling with that in a little bit. Does that make sense?
But to me, it'd be the same thing.
Ultimately, he ends up in the same place. But I've already started seeing some political signs going up around town. There are people who want power. And do you get what I'm saying with that statement? I don't think God wants power in the same way that we as people want power. I think God is in charge. And therefore, God does what God does. Now, that paints some odd pictures for me. Sometimes that puts me in an odd place. Because what do you do with stories like this where God is saying, yeah, no, this isn't good. I'm messing with this. Sorry, you don't get what you want. I'm going to make things hard on you. What do we do with that? Is it okay for your God to make things difficult for you?
probably for their own good in the long.
And of course, we know that intrinsically. Does anybody like that answer? No, no.
That's what parents are for.
That's what parents are for, to make our kids' lives hard.
Sure. Builds character.
Builds character. So this story here is about building the character of humanity. God's been doing it since before the flood.
If you look at the big picture of things from Genesis to Revelation, like in Revelation, where they're talking about like Jesus isn't gonna come back until his word has been to all corners of the earth. And I feel like this is like part of the process of like, this is part of where he's gonna be giving us each of our souls that are on earth, the possibility to come to Jesus. He needs maybe the time. I'm not for sure. Like, I don't think we really know the answer, but I think it all has to do from that, and it happens from the end of time on what's gonna happen on the languages. Because think of missionaries, you think of like all the different cultures and what they bring in life, and I just think they're all uniquely made. And I think it's a beautiful picture.
On the surface level, this feels a little bit like dad's come in and said enough is enough, and you all go to your rooms. In 2018, Melissa and I went and did an evangelism training, and one of the key passages for this evangelism training was this passage. And what the leader told us is that exactly what you were hinting at, that God's confusing the language was far more about making sure that his name and his word made it to every corner of the world than it was about the punishing the people for what they were doing. And I wrestled with that for a little while. But what's clear is we've already proven it in our world today. Listen, the phone, we have a common language now. It's called binary. Zeros and ones, data. We have a common language, and what we're accomplishing with that common language is phenomenal and a little bit scary, right? Because we've already kind of almost jumped the shark and moved into AI and what that can do to take over the world. We didn't stop at what was good. We were kind of pressing in beyond it. And I think that what you're saying is true. There's a sense in which we know that because of this story, because their languages were confused, the people spread out because they cloistered with people who they could communicate with. And they began to build civilizations, and they began to build a world. And the interesting thing about this is I never even thought to do any research on this until just recently. I've done a lot of research on the Noah flood story. There are well over 22 different civilizations that have flood narratives, and almost all of them are within 80% the same. They all have a lot of the same details. But did you know that there are more civilizations that have stories around this than there are the flood? This notion that human beings would seek to overthrow the deity, and that the deity would come and confuse them and cause them to disperse amongst the earth. How do you feel about that? We tell the story of Noah's flood all the time, but do we tell this one?
Just helps the evil not be able to concentrate and erase God again by spreading out.
By spreading us out, it dilutes the evil in each person.
The bad influence.
I hadn't really considered that. I like that statement. I want to let that marinate a little bit.
So it's kind of like dad coming in and saying, you guys are behaving and too quiet together. Let's.
Most dangerous thing when you got toddlers, when the room gets quiet. Right? You know what I'm saying? All parents and grandparents in the room, you've been there, right? If they're being loud, it's fine. You can handle the loud, you can tune it out. When things get quiet,
Sure.
Yeah.
uh-oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which, God did still commanded them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and fill it with his image, right? We are still his image bearers. And here we have a group of people who are working in the exact opposite direction of what God has called us to. And so there's a sense in which this, what feels like a punishment, as you're pointing out, really is God saying, look, I'm trying to help you out here. This is for your benefit. And so I'm going to spread you out. An old farmer once told me that Christians are a lot like manure. You pile them up and all they do is stink. You spread them out and things can grow. There's a sense in which, as the people are trying to stay together, they are losing sight of who they are in God. And they start to think that they can be God and that they can make a name for themselves and they can do what they believe is best instead of doing what God knows is best. Any other thoughts? Up here on the board, I drew an example. See that character right there in the upper left-hand corner of my board? That's Chinese. That's the Chinese symbol for the word boat. Now, for us, that doesn't mean anything, right? But let me break it down for you. See this tower section here? That is the symbol for a vessel of any kind, something that holds other things. This is their number 8. This means people. The Chinese word for a boat is a vessel for 8 people. Anybody get goosebumps with that? The Chinese word for temptation is tree serpent evil. Anybody find that intriguing? The languages around the world point to a reality that we were once one with one story. And each of those languages point to one God who stepped in and changed things. Up until about 400 BC, when Confucianism and Taoism stepped into China, they were a monotheistic religion culture. They believed in one God, and they worshiped the one God. Somewhere along the way, they lost sight of it. When I read this story now, I am reminded that God has a plan. God has a plan for each and every one of us. And God has a plan for the world. And a part of God's plan includes each and every one of us playing our part. But if we choose not to play our part, God will shift the plan and do what it takes to make his plan happen, with or without us. Probably the most frightening thing as a Christian you could ever experience is to hear God say, well, I guess I'll do it without you. And the sad reality is these people decided they were going to do it without God. Any other thoughts? Eight and 9. So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. What do you think? What do you notice? What questions does it make you ask? Go for it.
How did he scatter them? Did he like pick them up and just put in places? Or did he like inform them that they have to like, if other places had other dialect, did he inform them to go find the dialects that they knew?
Well, we don't have a complete story as to how exactly God scattered them. Sociologists and historical sociologists have done a lot of study about the movement of human beings. And they claim that they know where we came from, somewhere around either somewhere between Ethiopia and Mesopotamia, and that humanity is spread out from there. Interestingly, over the holidays, I was watching a documentary that said that they have found proof that human beings have been in South America for well over 12,000 years, which is completely foreign to what I remember being taught when I was in school. Now, whether or not that lines up with the biblical timeline is not what I'm debating, but I'm just saying that they're finding that humanity started building the most recent versions of civilization all about the same time, all across the globe. What's that sound like? Doesn't that sound like this?
They didn't stop just building the tower. They stopped building everything the way I read it.
They stopped building the tower, they stopped building the city, they stopped trying to do what they were doing, and they all went their separate ways. And I think that knowing what I know about God from the rest of Scripture, I think I can answer your question a little bit, Kenzie, with this. Each and every one of us, there's something within us when we know a place is home. Do you know what I'm saying? When there's something deep within us that knows that this is the place I'm supposed to be for right now. And there have been probably a lot of you have had times in your life where you're like, it's time for us to pull up stakes and move. And maybe you moved a great distance, and maybe you moved across town, and maybe you just moved down the road. But I hear this story all the time in different forms, but almost everybody has the same thing. It's like God puts in us, kind of like the homing pigeons, that we know our place. And a lot of the cultural myths around the globe tell that kind of story, that they went until they found their place. We were told this story about the founding of Tell City, Indiana. Tell City, we were there for 6 years. It's on the Ohio River, and it's one of 3 Swiss colonies in the state of Indiana. It's one of like 6 Swiss colonies in the Midwest. And it's really odd because the Swiss really didn't do a lot of migrating. They were pretty content. But, in the midst of German territory, we got lots of Germans around here and all over the Midwest, and a lot of English. And usually there are stories about, why they left and where they went. But for the Swiss, they said they settled in Perry County because the northern slope of the Ohio River felt like home. It wasn't the Alps, it wasn't the mountains that they were used to, but it felt like the hills in the valley of where home was. And so they stopped there and they settled there. I think that there's something that God puts in each and every one of us that, on the one hand, we know where home is. And so I think that God sent the people to all of these different places across the entire globe so that they would find their space and their place where they could bring the image of God to bear on the world. Does that make sense?
Like they were kind of just informed, like, go find the people that.
Yeah, they were, to a certain degree, they were just kind of informed. Now, that's the gospel according to Samuel Paget, and you can take that for what it's worth, and that and about $7 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks once they open it up. But there have been times when Les and I, in ministry in particular, we knew 22 years ago when I said yes to God that we were agreeing to be nomads and we were going to move. Never in my life did I think I'd come to Illinois. Thank you guys. We almost went to North Carolina. We were this close. For a brief moment, we almost lived in Kentucky. I don't know what I was thinking there. Texas, we were almost going to go to Texas. That was like 11th hour. God shut that door. But in each instance, when I would go and I would talk to a church, there was a couple of times where we both said, this isn't right. One time we said yes anyway, and it didn't end well. The other time we said no, and God brought us something better. Now, if you've not moved a whole lot, maybe you don't have that sense, or maybe you just are where God has called you to be. And so I think that there's a sense in which God who scattered them would also be the God who told them where to land. Does that make sense? Any other thoughts? Go for it.
Time when the land was divided,
Right.
which was a little bit before. Is it possible that it could have been during the same time? Or if God had divided the land, that it wasn't divided completely, and so then maybe still crossed over to South America and.
Oh, if you want to talk from a scientific standpoint, I absolutely believe that after the flood, we entered the Ice Age, and that the land bridge that they talk about from Asia to North America, it was absolutely in existence at this point. And so God actually confused their language at the most appropriate time where people could get the greatest access to the globe. I would absolutely say that. I would say that, they've done a lot of studies that, for instance, I read a fictional book, it was a Christian fiction about how people came to the British Isles. And they talked about them just walking across on dry land. That a lot of geologists say that in the last ice age, that the English Channel wasn't a channel, it was a valley. And that the British Isles were just a set of mountains and hills in the midst of a great peninsula. And so I think that God absolutely took advantage of the fact that the ice age was here and that the land masses were all still pretty connected to each other. They estimate that New Zealand used to be its own continent, about 1.5 times the size of Australia, and that it was connected to a lot of the Polynesian islands, and that when the Ice Age was here and the sea levels were lower, that people could have easily just walked out there. They didn't have to sail all of it, but then there were a lot of people who sailed to the other places throughout the Pacific. So my personal opinion, again, gospel according to Samuel Paget, take that for what it's worth. I think absolutely. God uses the natural world and the things that science has said. We're pretty sure this happened, and God uses it to his advantage. Now, the thing I'm not certain of is that whether or not science has its timetable correct. But we can argue that another time. Any other thoughts?
Teleport somebody in the New Testament, see?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's just go straight into the world of science fiction. One of my favorite stories in the book of Acts, Philip the evangelist. He's in one town talking to the Ethiopian eunuch. He gets him saved. The Ethiopian eunuch says, let's get baptized. And he baptizes him in a little puddle by the side of the road. And the next thing you know, God teleports him. It's about 25 miles away. It says in the next moment, he was there. I can't wait until the resurrection because I just want to hop all over the world and do it in the blink of an eye. Trust me, this body ain't walking that far. So if God could do it there, it says the Spirit did that. Could God, there you go, Kenzie, came right back to what you said. It's like God was playing Sims, our kids play that, picked up this little people and said, no, you're not staying here, I'm putting you over here. Drop you in South America. Take the shortcut. And you're gonna go to down in South Africa and sorry, you gotta deal with, Scandinavia, you gotta deal with the cold. You're designed for it. Maybe he did. Very well could have. One of the things that this story always pushes me on, though, is I don't fully understand God. And I will never fully understand God. But it does cause me to have to wrestle with the reality that sometimes God will do something to me that I don't think is good, that I don't receive as good, and that I'll even gripe about that, saying, God, this was not good at all. Why would you do this to me? But I don't understand the full picture. And God will always bring good from it, even if I don't understand how. And that's what this story tells me. Take that for what it's worth. Go for it.
I think it also shows the mercy of God. He could have done a lot of things to stop it. And yet you're talking about why he didn't, you just let it fail. But I think the fact that he said, okay, go somewhere else. I think that shows his mercy will go to great ends.
There is a part of me, when I don't think about God's mercy, that I think along John's lines, that God should have let them build it up, and then he should have come down like Godzilla and just kicked the tower and let it go sprawling across them. But that's not very nice. But there is a sense in which sometimes God's mercy causes us to experience something that we don't like, because it puts us in a place where we can experience what we need. And beyond that, I don't have any more answers, so I'll see if I pass the test once we get there. Any other thoughts on our detour to Babel? Questions, comments, concerns? Then verse 10. This is the account of Shem's family line. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arphaxad had lived 35 years, he became the father of Shelah. And after he had became the father of Shelah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. And after he became the father of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Starting to see a trend here already? Looks a little different from the one before, doesn't it? When Eber had lived 34 years, he became the father of Peleg. And after he became the father of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he became the father of Reu. And after he became the father of Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and had other sons and daughters. Reu had lived 32 years, he became the father of Serug. And after he had became the father of Serug, Reu lived 270 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And after he became the father of Nahor, Serug lived 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. And after he became the father of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and had other sons and daughters. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So as I read that, what do you notice?
Not living as long.
Definitely not living as long. All,
And a lot of daughters too.
absolutely. Each one of them had sons and daughters. You remember what I pointed to last week? I noticed Noah never gets that tag, does he? We never see in Noah's line that he had other sons and daughters other than Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Anything else that stands out to you? They're having their kids a lot younger.
Their kids are younger.
Anything else? Yeah.
What happened to the 120 years?
We don't get the 120 years until much later. But we're seeing it kind of, God says, I'm not going to contend with their spirit. And so, at the time of the flood, he says that's where it's going to go. And we're seeing it constrict down to that. We don't get there just yet. I mean, realistically, Nahor is the closest. He only lives 138 years total. But we're starting to get down to that 120 years, aren't we? Anything else you notice?
I guess we still see that the firstborn is, we can assume they're the firstborn, or the only ones it's important enough to talk about.
What we're getting is the son for which is moving the plot line forward. We don't actually know if they're the oldest, the youngest, unless they list multiple children, which the only time we get multiple children, right, is where? Terah?
Yeah.
We did in the previous list get a brother to Arphaxad, right? Or no, Peleg. We get Peleg's brother.
Well, our Faxalad had 4 other brothers too.
But in this list, we're only getting the line that moves the story forward. Now, thank you, Carol, for pointing this out earlier because I had forgotten about this reality. But we can do a little bit of math and find out approximately when the Tower of Babel happened. Because it says that Shem was 100 years old when Arphaxad was born. Arphaxad was 35 when Shelah was born. So we're at 135 years, give or take. Now, we don't exactly know how old Shem was when they got on the ark, but we can estimate around 100. So interestingly, if that's the truth, Arphaxad was born shortly after they got off the ark. You see what I'm saying there? Because if we go back in the story of Noah, it says Noah was 500 years old when he had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it took him 100 years to build the ark. And that they all got on the ark, but we don't get any children being born on the ark. We had a long discussion around this. So approximately, we can estimate that we got about 35 years after the flood when Shelah is born. We go to Eber and we're up to 69 years. And then it says when Eber was 34, that's when Peleg was born. And if we go to the other list, it says when Peleg was born, he was named Peleg because it says
divided.
The world was divided. So sometime within 69 years of the flood, the Tower of Babel happens. That's pretty disappointing, isn't it? I was really kind of hoping for a couple 100 years. Hoping that maybe they'd learn the lesson a little bit longer than that, but they didn't, did they? Anything else that stands out to you in this genealogy? Any other thoughts? So we had this list, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth before. Now here in verse 26, we get Abram, Nahor, What's the third one?
Haran.
Aaron,
Haran? Haran?
Haran.
Do you think that that's their birth order? I'm just asking because before we got Shem, Ham, and Japheth, then we pretty much had determined that wasn't their birth order. Probably not.
probably in least to most important or something.
If we look at this order, right, Shem is the family we're following. Ham is the family of antagonists. And Japheth is kind of the auxiliary character, right? If that is true, is Abram, who's Abram going to become? Our hero, right? This is the chosen family. Who's Nahor going to become? The antagonist. Anybody know about the story of Nahor and his family? They become antagonists to Abram's grandson, Jacob. What about Haran? Do we get anything about Haran?
Had other gods.
They did. They absolutely worshipped other people.
And so did the other one too.
Nahor and Haran both did not pursue God. So I don't know that this is their birth order, but I've often thought that they're in this order for the same reasons. Abram becomes our hero, Nahor becomes our antagonist, and Haran's just part of the rest of the setting. And interestingly enough, the place where a lot of this antagonism takes place happens to be in a place called Haran. We'll see that here in a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Developed the tradition of blessing the firstborn son. Did they have to get rid of that tradition?
No, the patriarchal tradition of blessing the firstborn son developed because of the economic culture of the world. The oldest male heir was to be the person who had to take care of the rest of the clan. And so that's why they would get 90% of the inheritance, and all the rest of the sons would only get 10% divided equally amongst them, because the oldest son had to be responsible to make sure that everybody else got taken care of. But that develops over time. Now, we don't know which of these three is the oldest son, do we? We make the assumption that because Abram is listed first, he's the firstborn, but we don't generally get that. Like I said last week, we discovered that the other three were listed in a different order out of birth, because if you go back into chapter 10, it deals with Japheth first, which implies he's the firstborn. And then it deals with Shem, who's the middle child, and then it deals with Ham. Now, the other side of that is the cultural conventions of the day were the firstborn son was the chosen one. And yet we're going to see all throughout the rest of Genesis that just because the world says this person's the chosen one doesn't mean that God says this person is the chosen one. Do you get the difference? And of course, we see this time and time again. God says, I don't look at what the world looks at. God looks at the heart. God looks for the one who will pursue him. God looks for the one who will follow him. God looks for the one who will make his kingdom come to bear on the world. So if our formula from before stands, Haran is probably the oldest, Abram's probably the middle child, and Nahor is probably the baby. Which, as I think about the stories of Isaac and Jacob and their interactions with their cousins, that makes a whole lot of sense. I say as the oldest child who always has to be the responsible one. Anything else stand out here? We got 16 minutes. Let's finish the chapter. I'm gonna read 27 through 30. This is the account of Terah's family line. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, in the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. So what do you notice? What stands out? Yeah.
Why'd they have to point out that she couldn't have babies?
Why did they have to point out that Sarai was barren? What you think?
Because later it was gonna become really important.
It's a key part of the setting of this story, where the world says there's no way forward. God says, watch this. What else you got?
This also kind of answers where the question we always get, where did those guys get their wives?
This time they're telling us.
Tell us he married his brother's daughter or something.
Niece, I guess, right?
He married, he married his cousin,
His niece. How?
niece.
A niece, is that?
Yeah,
The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, her sister, and they were the daughters of his brother Nahor. Or Haran.
Nahor's wife was Milcah, and she was the daughter of Haran. So Nahor married his niece.
His niece.
We don't get the name of Iscah again, though. I don't know what, hey, but that's another lady that gets mentioned. We're moving up a little bit, a little less chauvinistic, right? Anything else you noticed? Notice Haran dies. As a character, is he going to contribute to the story a whole lot?
himself, no.
Himself, no, but he dies where? Where he was born in Ur. Ur is modern day Iraq and Kuwait. It's right around that area. From a historical standpoint, they have shown that Ur at one point in time was probably a civilization of close to 100,000 people. Not a minor place. Anything else you notice? Any other questions? Then let's finish the chapter. 31 and 32. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and he died in Haran. What do you notice?
205 years.
He lived a good long life. He's not quite down to the 120 years yet, but he lived a long life, didn't he? Anybody know how far it is to get from Ur to Canaan via Haran? Anybody have any idea? Back when I was, and I know this is going to show age, and for some of you, I'm apologizing in advance. But back when we had the first Persian Gulf conflict, the Evansville Courier put out a map And somewhere in my office, I've got a copy of this map. I found it online and then I lost it. But I found it again and I made a copy of it. And what they did is during that conflict, they superimposed the map of the Middle East over the Midwest. And they put Jerusalem right over Evansville. Okay? On that map, they showed where Kuwait was. And is about on the border between Kuwait and Iraq. And it just so happened that about that spot in the United States is Washington, D.C. Now, Haran, we know, is up at the very top of Iraq. And it just so happened on the map of the United States that was superimposed, it's about the spot of where Toronto is. So imagine by foot going from Washington, D.C. to Evansville via Toronto. Anybody want to take that journey?
Um,
Not on foot.
Gotta go around the Smoky Mountains anyways.
Yeah, you gotta go around the Smoky Mountains, find a good way past, all right? Who wants to go mountain dwelling? Instead of mountains, they had a big desert to deal with. But realistically, to put it into perspective, the journey that we have here is from Washington, D.C. up to Toronto, and then back down to about Evansville. Do you think of this area being that big? We don't generally, do we? Now, for years, this made a whole lot more sense, and I'm gonna have to come up with a new example because I don't live in Indiana anymore. But if you take the state of Indiana and you divide it down the middle, straight through Indianapolis, the western half of Indiana is about the size of the nation of Israel. All of the stories of the Old Testament essentially take place in a geographical location about the size of the western half of Indiana. Does that put this all into a little bit of perspective?
If you walk from Toronto to Evansville, it's 10 days.
A walk from Toronto to Evansville is 10 days. That's with our modern highways and roads and everything else. What?
Me, I just said it'd probably take me a little longer.
Well, that's 10 days walking straight through. Most people would probably stop for 2/3 of the day. So this is the end of chapter 11, and this is the end of what has been traditionally called the prehistory. From chapter 12 forward, most historians will say this is measurable time. We can know pretty accurately from the time of Abram forward where we're at in human history. A lot of historians are unwilling to pinpoint the events from 11 backwards. Yeah.
So if Tara was gonna go start this, find somewhere else to live, why wouldn't he take anybody that could reproduce if Sarah was barren? I mean, he took his grandson, at least he's taking care of his grandson.
He's taking care of his grandson, but his grandson is married.
But
That we know of. Probably just teenager
and
or.
maybe, and that doesn't mean that there's nobody else with him, I guess.
Well,
But
there's no one else from his household. No other family members.
okay,
We'll read moving forward that Abram has all kinds of servants.
all right.
But your point is, he's not bringing anybody who's gonna carry on the line, really.
Well, Abram and Lot, I guess, can.
Abram and Lot technically can, but Sarai has been barren already for a while. And Lot's nothing more than a sniveling little brat for the most part, from what we can tell.
He cares more about love than reproduction.
Ooh. Kenzie over here is getting all philosophical and saying that maybe he cares more about love of family than he does whether or not they're gonna have more kids. I mean, geez, come on. You watch too many fairy tales there, girl. Yeah,
Yeah, but later, whenever Abram and Lot were going and they decided to settle, there was too many for them to settle together and they had to divide. So they're
correct.
between their, maybe not their immediate family, but at least their servants and their livestock and all that. Both of them had a lot.
But at this point in time,
One couple thousand cows.
well, but I just want to set the stage before we jump too far that forward. We have a family without a home, right? They left they're heading to Canaan. They've been waylaid. The RV got flat and they're stuck in Haran, right? I mean, he says they were going to Canaan, but he never makes it. He dies there in Haran. And so you have Abram and his wife, who doesn't have kids and can't seem to have kids, and their nephew, a family without a people, a family without a home, a family in a foreign land, and not really a whole lot going for them. Anybody ever feel like they're in a situation like that?
Probably spoke a different language too.
Probably spoke a different language from the locals. I mean, they're just waylaid. Don't lose sight of the setting. Because if we jump too quick into chapter 12 and we read what God says, we'll miss the little bit of, can you sense a little bit of desperation in this? He's already left That's where his family was. That's where his people were. That's where they spoke the language. And has all kinds of possibilities to it. It was a megapolis for its day. You could probably easily find work in Who's going to find work in Haran? You don't know anybody. You don't speak the language. You don't own anything.
You're just going on a side.
Yes. And so into situations where for us it might feel hopeless. Remember 2 words, but God. When the wheels fall off and the plan falls apart, remember, but God. The first words for chapter 12 is, the Lord had said to Abram. In the midst of a desperate situation, the Lord speaks. And so I'm going to leave us right there. The prehistory paints the picture of why the world is so broken, why the world needs redeeming, why there are people all over the world and they speak different languages. They tell us why God keeps pursuing us and why we seem to always fall short. Maybe they truly are myths. Maybe none of the people in them are real. Maybe. I don't think so. But they absolutely do tell us why the world is the way it is. Why humanity's broken, why marriages struggle, why men and women argue and bicker with each other, why men seem so tied to their work and trying to squeak out an existence, and why women are so bent on relationships and making things work, and why siblings seem to have rivalry against each other, and why we can't seem to make families work, and why people just don't get along, and all those stories are in here, aren't they? But remember, but God. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for these stories that we tell over and over again that remind us that you had a different plan for the world, that you wanted us to live with you, to bear your image across the entire face of the earth. And Lord, you are working to fulfill that plan. I pray that we won't be so short-sighted that we would buy into lesser things, that we might try to build our own towers and our own cities instead of looking for what you have in store for us. And Lord, when our plans fall short, and when our world seems to be falling apart, may we listen for you. And may we pursue you above all else. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And I look forward to jumping into Abram's story next week with you guys. God bless.